When my father looked me in the eye and said, "You've always been the family's mistake." "Colleen." I didn't cry. He said it in front of everyone, my mother, my brother, his fiancé, right before the engagement toast. The room went quiet, except for the sound of glasses clinking, as if pretending nothing had happened could erase the sting of his words. For years, I thought silence would protect me. That night, it became my weapon. They had no idea the family mistake they mocked owned the ground beneath their feet, and before the night was over, I would remind them. The moment my shoes sank into the soft soil of Sonoma, I felt the strange pull of a place that used to feel like home. The air carried the faint sweetness of ripe grapes and oak barrels, comforting once, but now foreign. This wasn't nostalgia. This was duty. I came because I was expected to, because my brother's engagement was the kind of family performance no one dared skip. The Sunvale Ridge Resort shimmered in the evening light, all glass towers and manicured vines. Guests whispered about how perfect it was, how elegant, tasteful, and so fitting for the Danes. I let them talk. They didn't know the land beneath their heels belonged to me. 2 years ago, I'd bought it through my own company. Quietly, deliberately. Some truths don't need an audience, until the right moment. Inside, laughter broke like glass. Alyssa's voice rang clear from the center of the room, smooth and bright. She looks like the accountant who got lost. Her friends burst into laughter, silk dresses swaying like mocking flames. My mother's polite smile faltered, but stayed in place. My father muttered something about how I'd always been a bit different, and that was enough to make me invisible all over again. I ordered a glass of Chardonnay, steady hands hiding the heat rising in my chest. Above me, the chandeliers I once approved glimmered, thousands of tiny reflections of the woman no one truly saw. Standing quietly in the room she built, my father had always treated dinner like a lecture hall. Between servings of roast and wine, he'd recite his favorite maxim, "A man builds, a woman maintains, that's balance." For years, I believed him, believed that balance meant stability, that silence was grace. But silence, I learned, was just another way to make a woman small enough to fit inside a man's idea of order. At 19, I left home with $400, a second-hand suitcase, and anger heavy enough to last a lifetime. I didn't look back. 18 years later, I'd built a career my father would never have understood, and among the many things I quietly acquired was the very resort where his pride now strutted. Still, he never asked what became of me. They never do. Music swelled through the ballroom, violins under laughter. My father stood beside Victoria Dane, Alyssa's mother, both radiating a confidence that comes from pretending wealth can't run dry. He spoke loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. The Whitmore family still has its stake in Whitmore Instruments. We're a legacy family. My hand froze on the stem of my glass. Whitmore Instruments had been sold 15 years ago to a Korean conglomerate. Since then, my parents had lived off his pension and denial. Victoria's smile was precise, polite. That's wonderful. Alyssa and Trent will carry that prestige beautifully. It sounded like admiration, but it wasn't. It was negotiation. In her eyes, I saw calculation, not warmth. As she lifted her flute of champagne, a server brushed past, knocking her leather-bound planner to the floor. I bent to help, and a folded document slipped loose. The header caught my eye for a fraction of a second. Joint venture, Whitmore and Dane Holdings. My stomach tightened. My father's name was written in bold beneath hers. A partnership, a merger, a trap. By the time I looked up, Victoria was already plucking the paper from my hand, smile intact, just some boring legal thing. Dear, I'd seen that smile before, in boardrooms right before a deal went bad. It was the look of someone who'd already decided who the fool in the room was supposed to be. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my desk in the suite when an anonymous email appeared in my inbox. "They're using your family name to borrow. Check the SEC filings." I forwarded it to Harper Lang, my assistant, then went downstairs for coffee. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with her message. "Colleen, you need to see this, on the video call." Harper's face looked sharper than usual, tension cutting through her usual composure. She shared her screen. Dane Wine Group, liabilities, $12 million unpaid debt, 3 overlapping loans tied to the same property. An internal note, Whitmore name provides credibility. The words made my pulse slow. My father's bragging had turned into someone else's collateral. Then Harper switched tabs. There, stamped and signed, was a rejected loan application dated 3 months earlier. The approving officer, Colleen Whitmore. I laughed, quiet and bitter. So they're marrying into the bank that turned them down. Harper frowned. They think you're just his sister. Then that's their first mistake. When the call ended, I stayed in the silence of the room that carried my signature on its deed. Below, laughter rose from the courtyard. Alyssa's melodic voice, my father's proud chuckle, the sound of toasts clinking against polished glass. I swirled the wine in my hand, watching the liquid catch the light. The scent that used to comfort me, oak, fruit, warmth, now carried something else. It smelled like debt, and I could already taste the ruin hiding underneath the sweetness. The next afternoon, the sun spilled over the back garden of the resort, painting everything gold and calm, until my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar address blinked on the screen. Whitmore, Harbor, Boston, calm. The message was short, a single line that sent the air out of my lungs. They're leveraging your father's old patents for collateral. Stop them before Monday. Brian Whitmore. My father's distant cousin, the kind of man who knew corporate filings the way others knew family trees. I pulled up the Dane Wine Group's public records on the SEC database. Under secured assets, one name leapt out. Whitmore Family Trust. I had never heard of any trust by that name. A sound behind me made me turn. Harper Lang stood there with her tablet glowing faint blue against the dim light. They filed the paperwork yesterday, she said. Victoria Dane submitted documents with your father's signature. The signature was real, bold and curved. The ink still wet in the scanned copy. He actually signed it, Harper whispered. He doesn't know what he signed, I said. My father had always been too proud to ask questions. All Victoria had to do was flatter him, tell him that the Whitmore name still carried prestige, and he would lend it without hesitation. Harper scrolled through another screen, her voice dropping. Victoria was prosecuted 8 years ago for wine fraud. Her attorney was Julian Hart. He's their legal advisor now. He's here, Colleen. I saw him at the engagement dinner. A cold rush slid through my chest. This wasn't coincidence. It was a setup. Inside the ballroom, my father stood laughing beside Victoria as if nothing could touch him. Colleen, he called, smiling proudly. Victoria's husband built a magnificent business. You could learn something about class. I smiled, steady and quiet. I am, father. I'm learning exactly how classes work. Harper found me minutes later, eyes sharp. Their internal records show Dane Winery is trying to acquire Sunvale Ridge through a shell company, SRV Development, LLC. I froze. SRV was mine, owned entirely by my fund, Golden Arc Capital. They're trying to buy what I already own, I said, a low laugh escaping. Then let them pay for it first, Harper replied. Her smirk faded into silence as we looked at the same truth from different sides. My whole life, I'd been treated as if I didn't understand business, yet somehow I was the only one at this party who actually owned it. That night, the ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, the air sweet with the smell of wine and vanity. My mother moved through the crowd, radiant, telling guests about the perfect union of the Whitmores and the Danes. When she saw me, she gave that polite, brittle smile. Colleen, dear, try to smile. You look tired. Around her neck hung my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one promised to me when I was a girl. Without hesitation, she unclasped it and turned to Alyssa. This belonged to my mother. You'll carry it now, as our future daughter. The world went quiet. Alyssa's fingers traced the pearls, admiring their sheen. It matches my engagement ring perfectly, she said, beaming. I couldn't look at my mother. The weight in my chest pressed hard and wordless. The necklace, the only inheritance tied to love rather than pride, was now fastened around a stranger's throat. Moments later, a waiter stumbled, his tray tipping. I bent to help, and the light from the chandelier hit the underside of one pearl. I froze. Etched faintly beneath the clasp were 2 small letters. C.W. My initials. My grandmother had carved them in by hand when I was 16. She'd once told me, so you'll never forget what's yours. Now it rested on someone who didn't even know its story. I stepped outside. the cold air slicing through the noise. From the terrace, I could still hear laughter, clinking glass, and my mother's voice singing Alyssa's praises. My phone buzzed. Harper again, her tone clipped and fast. "Colleen, I found something else. Victoria's preparing documents to transfer all company debt to Trent after the wedding. She's making him a co-signer." I gripped the railing. My brother, naive, soft, and hopelessly in love, was about to inherit $12 million of someone else's failure. Through the glass doors, I watched them. Alyssa's hand in Trent's, cameras flashing, my father's proud grin, my mother's tears of joy. They were celebrating a future already sinking. I typed a single message to Harper. "Gather everything. We end this tomorrow." The wine in my glass trembled, reflecting the ballroom's golden light. I set it down and whispered to myself, not as a threat, but a promise. They wanted my family's name. Tomorrow, they'll learn what it truly means to bear it. That night, Harper and I slipped into the wine cellar, a quiet, hollow space that smelled of oak, dust, and secrets. Rows of bottles stretched endlessly, glinting under the dim fluorescent light. It was supposed to be a place of prestige, but under that hum, it felt more like a crime scene waiting to be uncovered. Harper opened her laptop and started typing, her fingers a blur. She'd broken into Dane Wine Group's internal network through public data. "They've been moving assets through shell companies," she murmured. "And look at this." On the screen appeared a folder titled Joint Trust Agreement, stamped with 2 signatures, Richard Whitmore and Victoria Dane. My breath caught. "He signed this thinking it was sponsorship paperwork," Harper said. "It's actually a liability transfer. If Dane Winery collapses, your family takes the fall." I stared at my father's handwriting, bold, confident, like every line he ever drew across my life. He'd always believed he understood the world better than I did. He never believed I could handle money. Now his name is the collateral. Harper didn't reply. She didn't have to. We both understood this wasn't just about fraud. It was the collision of pride and truth. I called James Rourke from the IRS Financial Crimes Division, a contact I hadn't used in years. "The Danes forged documents under my father's name," I said. "We've been watching them," he replied. "If you expose them publicly, we can act." I checked my watch, 11:47 p.m. The toast was tomorrow night, 20 hours left to end this farce. Harper printed every document, slipped them into a black envelope, and asked, "You really want to do this here? In front of them?" "They taught me silence," I said. "I'll give it back to them with sound." I switched off the lights. The cellar fell dark, leaving only the red glow of the Dane Winery logo, a ghost of wine, debt, and guilt. The next morning was offensively beautiful. Clear sky, warm breeze, not a trace of the storm brewing beneath it. Guests poured into the resort while staff prepared the courtyard for the engagement toast. Inside the office, no one knew was mine. Harper waited beside the control panel. "The AV system's ready," she said. "Just say the word." The USB in her hand held everything: financial reports, Victoria's conviction record, forged contracts, and the purchase files they'd sent me under a fake name. As she scrolled through the guest list, she froze. Julian Hart's here. The lawyer who once saved Victoria from prison was now advising the wedding. This wasn't a celebration. It was a laundering ceremony. Around noon, I ran into my father in the corridor, beaming. "Victoria and I are finalizing the paperwork. Trent will be a co-signer. It's a great opportunity for him." "You mean her debt will be in his name," I said. "You're ruining a good moment. Colleen, why can't you just be supportive? Because support without truth is just decoration." He walked away, still blind. Later, at the bar, I crossed paths with Raymond Holt, an old investor. "Colleen Whitmore." He grinned. "Didn't expect to see the owner here." I raised a finger to my lips. Behind him, Alyssa appeared. "Got it." "Still the quiet storm," he whispered. Alyssa's smile froze. "Owner? What's that supposed to mean?" "He's mistaken," I said smoothly. People hear what they want. But suspicion had already taken root. A text from Harper lit my phone. "Victoria's transferring all winery debt into Trent's name tonight. If we don't stop it now, it's over." I looked out across the vineyard, Trent laughing, my mother fussing over Alyssa, my father toasting red wine to the future. A perfect portrait, waiting to be shattered. Tomorrow, I told Harper, when the toast begins, turn the lights white, no music, no filters. And then we show them what legacy really looks like. The following evening, Sonoma burned gold beneath the setting sun. Strings of lights glowed over the vineyard, flickering like captured fireflies. The air was rich with jazz, perfume, and the clink of crystal glasses, every sound rehearsed to perfection. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, invisible among the shimmer. Harper waited near the AV console, her hand poised over the control switch. My father climbed the stage beside Victoria Dane. Their smiles rehearsed, their alliance sealed in deceit. Victoria raised her glass, her voice clear and confident. This union represents trust, legacy, and the merging of two great families. Applause rippled through the crowd. I glanced at my watch. 8:59 p.m. 1 minute to truth, to love, to family, to the Whitmores and the Danes. I typed one word to Harper, now. The giant screen behind them flickered. At first, the guests laughed, thinking it was a glitch, until the slideshow of engagement photos vanished, replaced by documents glowing white under the lights. Dane Wine Group, fraud investigation report, federal indictment, Victoria Dane, debt transfer, Trent Whitmore. And at the center of it all, my father's signature under joint trust agreement. Gasps cut through the music. A glass shattered. Victoria's smile faltered. Some mistake in the presentation. No mistake, I said, stepping onto the stage. Just an overdue truth. Alyssa's face drained of color. My father's voice cracked. Colleen, stop this! You told me finance wasn't a woman's business. Remember? Tonight, it's mine. The ballroom doors burst open. 2 federal agents strode in. James Rourke and his partner, Victoria Dane. You're under investigation for wire fraud and falsifying federal records. The crowd erupted. Alyssa screamed, reaching for Trent. He stepped back, dazed, as the agents led Victoria and her daughter away. The lights turned stark and white, washing every mask clean. I looked over the faces that once mocked me, their silence louder than any applause. By the way, I said evenly, Sunvale Ridge belongs to me. You've all been drinking on my ground. No one moved, no one spoke. Only the faint drip of spilled wine echoed across the marble floor, sweet, red, and final. When the guests finally cleared out, the ballroom was unrecognizable. The music was gone, the laughter dead, and only the dim flicker of half-burned candles remained. Wine stains bled across the marble floor, reflecting pieces of shattered glass that once held everyone's illusions. My father sat slumped in a chair, his hands trembling against his knees. My mother stood beside him, eyes red, crying without sound. You could have told us who you became, my father said, voice low and tired. You never asked? I answered. He looked at me for a long time, and something shifted in his eyes, a mixture of regret and the painful knowledge that he'd built walls where there could have been pride. My mother's voice cracked. You own this place? And 5 others. I said, including the one that's been paying your mortgage for 3 years. I showed them the transfer records on my phone, the monthly deposits from Golden Ark Capital. Their silence filled the room heavier than any accusation could. Trent stepped forward, his voice unsteady. For years. I thought you looked down on us. But it was the other way around, wasn't it? Maybe, I said softly. But tonight, you saw the difference between pretending and earning. Among the shards of glass on the floor, something caught the candlelight, the pearl necklace. Alyssa must have dropped it during the chaos. I picked it up and placed it gently in my father's hand. Keep it. Some inheritances don't shine, but they still weigh heavy. He said nothing. My mother's tears were real this time, not polished or performative, just human. I turned toward the open doors, the cool wind from the vineyard rushing in. It carried away the smell of wine, the echo of shame, and the last trace of who they thought I was. 3 months later, the city stretched beneath me like glass and light. From the 32nd floor of the San Francisco Tower, the morning sun poured through the window, gleaming off the walnut table. Behind me, the logo of Golden Ark Capital glowed in brushed silver, a quiet reminder of everything that once seemed impossible. Today, I was signing the founding papers for a new fund, the Women Who Build Initiative, a program designed to help young women step into finance, leadership, and ownership without apology. Harper stood beside me, composed and sharp as ever. Across the table sat our small team, fresh faces filled with promise. Among them was Eva Morales, our first intern from Mexico, her notepad trembling slightly as she took her seat. When the meeting ended, Eva lingered by the window, hesitating before speaking. "Miss Whitmore, do you ever miss being part of your family?" I looked past her reflection, out toward the faint silhouette of the vineyards in the distance, glowing gold under the rising sun. "I still am," I said quietly. "I just built a better one." Harper smiled, the corner of her mouth tilting with that dry humor only she had. "Guess silence does build things after all." "Yes," I replied. "It's the foundation no one sees." As I left the boardroom, the sunlight caught my reflection in the glass wall. No longer the woman who stood quietly in a room full of mockery, but the one who owned the room entirely. My heels struck the marble floor, steady and certain. No apologies left to give, no recognition left to chase, only truth. And me, Colleen Whitmore, the woman who turned silence into her legacy.